talked about rearing these insect pests, I'd like to talk just a few minutes about their diet, or the food that they have to eat to be able to survive. Just like humans, we need vitamins in our diet, we need protein, we need sugars. Well, so do insects. And in fact, granular sugar, like table sugar that you may buy at the grocery store, we mix that with water, and some of our moths feed on that. You can also buy honey at your local grocery store or from a local beekeeper and mix that with water, and some of them feed better on honey water. We use a lot of eggs, and eggs is a great source of protein. We as humans eat a lot of eggs as well. White beans, lima beans, that's something that, we would cook that on the stove for us to provide that extra protein. But for the insects, we'll grind that up, and it makes like a really fine powder, and we will incorporate that with other vitamins. Now, I will say we do use a lot of vitamins that we add in with our protein and sugar, because we found out through the years, through research, that our eggs that these insects lay and will eventually hatch and become adults, they need a lot of protein as well as sugar. A lot of sugar helps with the egg development throughout their life cycle.
200 grams of sugar and a pinch of salt. We don't really measure that out, just throw a little bit in there.
And I will add on that, Lauren had mentioned a pinch of salt. So a lot of times in the wild, the moths, they need sodium in their diet. And if it's rained and the rain is starting to dry up, but there's like a little puddle area, the moths will get in that little muddy area, and they call it puddling, but they are getting the sodium out of the soil. And so again, since we don't have that, the salt is what we use here.
And this next one, same concept, except it's going to be 200 grams of honey and then 1,000 mils of water.
It helps with egg development and hatch. And there is research to support, because you could say, well, granulated sugar works just as well, but soybean loafers, they're a little bit harder to rear and keep alive, and so there's something with the honey that affects them a little bit different. And it smells really good. We use little 3.25 ounce cups for the honey or sugar solution in there. And then our lids, we burn a hole in the lid, and we take some Chem White, which is basically a thin paper towel. We twist that like a candle wick and stick that in there, so it's not too much, because if the moths get too wet, especially with the sugar, they'll stick together and things like that. So it's a wicking process.
So right now I have 200 mils of sterile water in there, and then I'm going to add 165 grams of sugar, and you kind of want to let that dissolve a little bit before you start pouring everything else on top.
So just like with nutrition for people, we need certain sugars, we need protein, so do the insects that we rear here.
Then you want to let it heat back up and let it get a little bit of boil on it before you pour your brewer's yeast in there. It likes to stick together, so the hotter your water, the less clumpy it gets. In this part, we do actually use both parts of the egg. Total, it's about 900 grams, which is about 17 or 18 eggs, and it is the whites and the yolks.
Toasted wheat germ, we use 200 grams, and we divide this into two different containers, so she's going to put 100 grams per beaker there. You can buy this at the local grocery store. We also include lima beans, of course. Many of you probably eat lima beans. We grind these up pretty fine, add that. That's a great source of protein for our plant bugs. We use soy flour.
All right, and then this will go in these 1 ounce cups. And you try to fill it enough for the pee-pee to get down and burrow.
So Shannon is making a diet that we use for fall armyworms. We do have a couple of chemicals that go in there. We have acetic acid, and if you've ever smelled that, really it's vinegar, just like you would purchase, at the local grocery store. This is a fun diet for us to make. It really comes out with consistency of Play-Doh.
You really get in
And
there.
so liquid is mixed. Now she's adding the dry mix.
Get in there.
That little pinch is enough for the water to feed off of and still have a little extra.
It is, and they also get under there and bury themselves.
Oh, cool. Why would they bury themselves?
When the fall armyworms are in the field, so they're feeding on the plant, and then the larvae or the baby, which is basically what we call a caterpillar,
Right.
it falls to the ground and it burrows down in the ground in the wild, and that is where they continue to pupate. So in the lab, of course, we don't have that option, and so their food is what they burrow down into and pupate there. They actually lay their egg into the plant, okay? And so since in the lab we don't have a plant, just gel friend, they can actually lay it in there and they get moisture from the gel and then they'll hatch from that. Go ahead, Lauren, tell what
And this again is just 500 mils of water with 20 grams of the gelatin.
looks delicious. Now you'll notice there that's much thicker, and if you compare the auger that we use for their diet and then the gel, what is actually used for oviposition or egg lay, it's very different. The auger will stay liquid, and then the gel will actually, it gets really thick, and it's really pretty cool. It cools really quick, and you can peel it up, so it's kind of neat to work with that. So both of those will go in the autoclave. We set that for 20 minutes, and then by the time the pressure reduces, it usually takes about an hour. And we do let that gel cool a little bit because we pour that into paraffin packs, and if it's too hot, it will melt the plastic in the paraffin.
That plant bug diet, we've been mixing up. You're gonna pour it to about there, fold it over, and then you want to get all the air out. And then we seal it with the heat sealer. For the nymphs, we'll seal these, and then since their mouth parts are still small and fragile, we'll stretch this parafilm out real thin. And then for the adults, they just get it plain Jane